Welcome to episode number 81 of the For Animals for Earth show, Sentience in Animals with the one and only Lori Marino. If you don't know Lori, she is a neuroscientist and an expert in animal behavior and intelligence. She's famous for her work on the evolution of the brain and intelligence in dolphins and whales, but also primates and farm animals. She has worn many hats, everything from being a student to a faculty member to a researcher and a collaborator. She's been featured in movies like Blackfish, Unlocking the Cage, and Long Gone Wild. She's on the team that's building the Whale Sanctuary Project, which, if you're not familiar with that, you're going to learn more about it today, but it's an alternative for whales who have only known captivity in like theme parks or aquariums, to be out in kind of more of a semblance of the wild, out in a part of the ocean where they get to explore and just live a better life. So she is part of that groundbreaking project. She is also the founder and executive director of the Kimmela Center for Scholarship-based Animal Advocacy. And they focus in kind of like three different areas, which is bringing science into animal law, promoting scholar advocacy, and applying science to animal advocacy. She basically lives on that cutting edge of combining animal welfare and science to like really make a difference for animals. She's published over 140 papers. She was part of the Someone Project, which gets into the sentience of farm animals and better understanding what farm animals are thinking and feeling. Um, Personally, I think in this episode, I probably said, "That's so cool," too many times. But I just think that the work that Lori does is just like the coolest work on the planet. She's taking science and data and a controlled test environment and research, and she's taking that and she's putting it together in a way that can really push the edge of animal advocacy and animal welfare in our world and really continue to introduce more and more of us humans to what animals might be thinking and feeling, and backing that up with science that's like, hey, this is actually realistic. And I think that just inevitably changes our hearts and changes the way we look at them and we treat them. And it's just, there's just so much power in the work that she does. So I think you're just going to absolutely love listening to her talk today. I've organized different follow up trails based on the conversation and the different things we discuss for you to go down and learn more, because I know you're going to want to dive into more information after you hear today's talk. Everything is organized in the show notes at foranimalsforearth.com/show/81. Yeah, I think that's all of the like housekeeping stuff to tell you. So let's dive in. I can't wait for you to hear this interview. A question that I feel like somewhat stands the test of time when you look at an animal is, what are they thinking and what are they feeling? And I know you're part of a group of people who have studied this in depth for years. I'm curious how we as a human race scientifically study these questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of people assume that other animals don't have minds or aren't intelligent and sentient and sensitive. And, all the science that we have tells us otherwise, tells us that they have minds like ours, and they have feelings and plan for the future and all that stuff. And the way you study it is really by asking questions in a way that you can interpret the answer. That you can study it in a laboratory, or you can study animal behavior out in the wild where they actually do things that are natural to them. So you can do both.
That makes sense. And you seem to have combined, like, almost carved a somewhat unique path where you've combined biology and psychology in studying these non-human animals.
Yeah.
And how, I mean, is that something that you always knew you wanted to do, or how did you evolve to this type of work?
Well, I always wondered about what it would be like to be a member of another species, even as a young kid, and I was always in the garden looking at insects and other animals and just thinking, what are you thinking? What is it like to be you? And so I got very interested in how the brain worked. And in college, I studied brains, neuroscience, and was interested in the brains of other animals, and pursued that path. And eventually, in graduate school, I saw a picture of a dolphin brain in a book, and I was so impressed that I thought, oh, okay, I can study that forever.
Oh,
So that was really what led me to focus quite a bit, not exclusively, but quite a bit on dolphins and whales. And I've studied their brains for 30 years now, all non-invasively, not in any way that hurts them. But it's been really quite a fun journey.
it's really cool. And was it hard to study them non-invasively? Was that something that other people were doing before you came into that interest?
Well, there weren't a lot of people, and there still aren't a lot of people who study dolphins and whales, especially their brains, because they have such large brains, because we cannot, thankfully, do invasive research with them. It's difficult to really find paths to finding out what the brain is like. But what I did is I studied brains of dolphins and whales who stranded and died naturally. And then I would use various imaging techniques to look inside the brain and examine the brain. So there are ways to do it. You can actually do neuroscience with dolphins and whales, as long as you're willing to, not use live animals.
It's cool because it seems like it's really kind of pushed creativity in how you even think of doing the studies, but then maybe even opened up more realizations by doing it the way you are.
Exactly. So if you know that you're limited in a certain way by what you can do and how you can ask questions and address them, it forces you to find, creative ways to address those questions. And that's exactly what we had to do. We could infer certain things from looking at the brains of deceased individuals. I also looked at fossils of dolphins and their brain cases. So I just tried to get as much information as I could on dolphin and whale brains in ways that were non-harmful to them.
I really admire studying that way in a way that's non-harmful because when I was young, I started to want to go into psychology and I was very scared by the idea of the labs and testing on animals. And I thought, I just can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, and for about a year after that, I worked in a lab where we did work with rats, and it
Mhm,
was terminal and
mhm,
invasive.
mhm.
And I got out of it because I just didn't want to do that. I just didn't feel like I wanted to spend my life killing rats.
I can relate. I mean, it makes sense. And it's really cool that you found this way to carve a different
Yeah,
path.
exactly.
And you know so much about whales and dolphins. And as you were describing their brains, I'm curious if you can share at a high level how those maybe compare to humans, and then what that led you to understand about what whales and dolphins are thinking and feeling.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, the thing about the brains of dolphins and whales and the brains of humans and other primates
Mhm.
is that we both have very big brains for our bodies. They're very elaborated, big cerebrum, big everything,
Okay.
a lot of wrinkles on the surface. But in some ways, the way that elaboration occurred was different in primates and dolphins and whales. So if you look at how the brain got big in dolphins and whales. It shows you that there's a different way for brains to evolve than just the way that the primate brain evolved.
Okay.
And so we have two different brains that are in many respects equally elaborated,
Okay.
but in different ways.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that tells you something about, the evolution of intelligence. It tells you something about the uniqueness of human intelligence and just how biology creates complex intelligence on this planet.
Uh-huh. The when you're when you're looking at kind of a whale or a dolphin brain, I know one of the things that you have spoken out about and advocated for is that it's not okay for these animals to be in captivity.
Yeah. So, I did do research with captive dolphins. So about 20 years ago, I did a study with Diana Reese in which we showed that bottlenose dolphins can recognize themselves in mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done with two bottlenose dolphins who were living in the Coney Island Aquarium, the New York Aquarium. And that was a big deal because it was the first time that anybody ever showed that a non-primate could
Okay.
really use a mirror to check themselves out. Um, and so a few years after that, I started to really think about their lives and what they experienced living in a small tank,
Mm-hmm.
just swimming around. And I realized that their welfare in marine parks was really poor.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they were taken away from their families and they died young and all kinds of horrible things. And I made the decision that I wasn't going to do any more research with captive dolphins. And that's how I started to develop the advocacy portion of my work,
Mm-hmm.
is to use the science to advocate for better welfare for them. And that's true for many animals. I mean, it's not just dolphins and whales who suffer in zoos and marine parks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I started the Kimmela Center, and then in 2016 I started the Whale Sanctuary Project as a way to find a way to get dolphins and whales out of these horrific circumstances, these concrete tanks, and give them an alternative, give them an opportunity to lead a more natural life.
Mm-hmm. The Whale Sanctuary Project is really like a dream come true. It's finally a solution, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you speak to what it is and where you're at even in the timeline
Oh,
of it?
yeah. It's really exciting. So, we have a lot of evidence that tells us that whales and dolphins suffer in marine parks. But unless you have an alternative, there's really not much you can do because most of them have been born in captivity. They don't have survival skills. You can't just take them out and dump them in the ocean, things like that. So what you can do, though, is provide sanctuary, which is a way to combine human care, but in a natural environment in the ocean. And that is a concrete way to find a path to phasing out, keeping these animals in these entertainment parks.
Mm-hmm.
So we started looking around for a bay for dolphins and whales, and we spent about 2.5 years and eventually found this beautiful bay in Port Hilford, Nova Scotia. And we announced that in 2020, and we started all of the environmental studies and all of the water studies and everything that needs to be done to get permitted to do this kind of thing. It's the first time it's ever been done. And so we are at a very critical point now because we've completed all of our studies,
Okay.
and we are actually building the infrastructure now. So There are a couple of orcas in Marineland, France, that we are trying to work with the French government to bring to our sanctuary. There are beluga whales all over the place who need a reprieve from the tanks. And so we're just beginning, but we anticipate having our first residents as early as next year.
Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, wow. It's such a groundbreaking thing, and it's really cool to be me as a spectator. It's cool to be living in a time to watch this happen, and I can't imagine you being on the project team, how it must feel.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's exciting. I mean, it's taken so much longer than any of us expected
okay.
because it is hard.
Okay.
But we're very excited because we're really getting to that point where we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
And speaking to it being hard, I'm curious how advocating in the beginning and even advocating now, is it I feel like one of the things that must be so helpful is that there are a group of people with such diverse, different backgrounds and skills coming together. But
Yeah.
I'm curious if it is scary, and if, when you mention hard, what are some of the things that are like really difficult to overcome? I mean, do you find that you've got most places kind of on the side with you and going, yeah, let's go, or a lot of opposition?
I think both. I mean, we have a tremendous following of people who understand what we're doing and want to see it happen and are supporting us.
Mhm.
And there are people who, for one reason or another, feel like they don't want this to happen. I mean, obviously, people that work in the captivity industry are not thrilled about this,
Right.
but some of them will work with us. And it's the kind of area that is so fraught with passion on all sides that you get a lot of pushback from different people who feel like, oh, you're not doing this right, or you're not doing, I mean, because it's taken so long, people feel like, oh, well, you're never going to do it. And we definitely are. And so, they're the people. It's interesting. The people part of this is the most difficult, not the technical, not
Huh,
any of the scientific part, but the people part, which
interesting.
is, and that goes on both sides. So we have a terrific local community of people near Port Hilford in Sherbrooke who actually work with us, support us, and are fantastic. And that makes all the difference.
I've heard you mention before that that makes all the difference in the world, is that local
Yeah, it
community
does.
there.
Yeah, it does. It you cannot do it without
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
support, that level of support.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
it's going to open up so many cool opportunities. I was just picturing like the young students who can intern, and even the not young, forever students that can be
Oh,
out there
yeah.
working. And I mean, just
Exactly. There's
incredible.
all kinds of opportunities that will open up. And I think, it's so exciting to me as an educator because it'll be a chance to really tell people why these animals belong in the ocean.
Mm.
When you go to a marine park, you are made to believe that the ones in the tanks are the lucky ones,
Right.
that, they're the ambassadors for their species and they get fed and
Right.
and it basically is an anti-conservation message
Mm.
because it says they should all be in tanks because that's the best place to be. We know better than that.
Hmm.
And a sanctuary is a way to exemplify that. It's a way to say, look, they're in a sanctuary. They really should be living their lives out in the ocean. They can't, and this is why. And
Hmm.
I'm hoping that it really is what changes the minds of people, especially the young generation, about keeping wild animals like this in captivity.
Hmm. It certainly seems like a high probability, and it's really, I think, very hopeful that it will be a bit of a tidal wave to more, right? I know there are a couple of other
Exactly.
sanctuaries
Yeah,
around the
yeah.
world, right?
We're working with a couple of others. The National Aquarium in Baltimore is looking for a site for 6 bottlenose dolphins that they have that they want to bring to sanctuary. Then there's a sanctuary that's almost completed in Iceland for 2 beluga whales. And that's done by Merlin Entertainment. So things are moving in that direction. We also worked with those 2 other organizations to create accreditation for
Oh, cool.
Cetacean sanctuaries.
Mhm.
That's really important because there are a lot of places that tell you, oh, this is a sanctuary for
Yes.
dolphins, but you go there and you can ride on the dolphin, they're breeding them, they're doing all the things that you don't do at an authentic sanctuary.
Mhm.
And so we want to make sure that those criteria are in place and places can be accredited and evaluated.
This is really helpful because I do believe that word sanctuary has become, it's like, ooh, let me latch onto that word. And then that
Exactly.
way, when I
Right.
advertise, I'm a sanctuary.
Sanctuary, refuge.
Yes.
Just because something says something on the
The
front,
sign. Uh-huh.
don't think that that's what it is. A lot of times it's not. And so, there are a lot of questions you should ask. I mean, one of them is if you can go to a place and touch the animals, or if they're baby animals, it's
Oh,
not a sanctuary, period.
okay.
You know?
Okay.
And so if you can touch baby tigers,
Hmm.
ride on the dolphins,
Hmm.
feed the elephants. I mean,
Hmm.
just all of the
Yeah.
stuff that you do in a zoo. If
Hmm.
if any of that's apparent, it's not really a sanctuary. They're just calling themselves that.
Mm. I think that's really helpful because something that is so popular right now is swimming with dolphins. And I think there's a lot of video footage out there that makes it look like dolphins love interacting with humans and they have so much fun and everybody's having the time of their lives, swimming
I
together.
know. I
I
know.
it's yeah, I mean, and you have studied their brains and really kind of know in depth more than probably most anyone else what they might be thinking and feeling. Can you speak to why they're probably not having the time of their lives?
Yeah, swimming with dolphins, again, is one of these things that people want to do, and almost any marine park will offer it because they know that people will pay a lot of money to do that. But it is a really bad idea and it's very risky. First of all, the dolphins do not want to swim with you. And if they don't comply, then they get a timeout and they're put in the back somewhere. I mean, they're doing this because that's how they get fed. They're
Okay.
not motivated to, hug you and kiss
Hmm.
you and all that stuff. That's not who they are. Um, and so you're doing it with a dolphin who is being forced. Um, the other thing people should know is that it's very risky, and there are tons of people who've been sent to the hospital being injured by
Okay.
dolphins. And why? Because the dolphins don't want to be with you. They get testy, they get annoyed, they might ram you or bite you. And there have been very serious injuries because of that. So it's not all sweetness and light and rainbows and unicorns. And it's very serious and very risky. And the other thing I've studied with uh, the late Scott Lilienfeld, who was a prominent clinical psychologist, is dolphin-assisted therapy. And
Mm.
that's the idea that, you pay money and you go and dolphins heal you somehow, or you get in the water with them and they heal you with their echolocation. It's garbage. There's absolutely no evidence that swimming with a dolphin is treats any disease. It doesn't treat autism. It doesn't treat cancer. It doesn't treat anything. And you might even get hurt.
Mm.
So it's a really bad situation.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that depth of knowledge because I do hope that it's something that those of us who are listening and learning it can share with everyone around us because it is really so common that it blows my mind.
Common, and people put their kids in the pool, dolphins are wild animals. They are not domesticated and they can kill you.
Mm,
Um, and these are not happy dolphins. So think about, I
mhm,
mean, you would never put your kid in a tiger cage or a cage with an animal, but a dolphin can do a lot of damage. So it's a really risky proposition.
mm-hmm. Really, really good to know. I would love to spend some time talking about some other types of animals that you've studied. I know that you've collaborated with some others on something called the Someone Project that's
Yeah,
focused on
yeah,
farm animals. Can you
right,
speak
right.
to that research a bit?
Yeah, so I did this work for Farm Sanctuary a few years ago. And basically, what we did is we tried to gather all the scientific evidence for farmed animals, pigs, sheep, cows, and chickens, and to find out who they are, And the whole idea is to get people to understand that they are someone. They're not a thing, they're not an object, there's someone with a mind. And we just pulled together all the scientific data and wrote papers on it and, published those papers over the span of about 3 or 4 years. And that was very helpful, I think, to a lot of people because a lot of people started to realize, oh, they didn't know that, chickens have feelings
Mm-hmm.
or pigs can do this or sheep, etc. And it opened people's eyes to who these animals are. And I hope in some small way help people to realize that they are someone, and when they're factory farmed, they suffer.
Right. And just the level of torture is
Yeah.
horrendous.
Well, I think people say, oh, well, these animals, they don't care whether they live or
Mhm.
die. They don't love their children. They don't, we make up all these fairy tales in our head to make it easy for us to eat them.
Mhm.
But none of those things are true. And we showed that from the scientific literature that cows do love their children, their calves. Chickens love their chicks. They actually exhibit optimism when they're treated well and pessimism when they're not treated well. Things that we recognize, they have personalities. So, it's not the case that they don't care
Right.
about life. They do.
Right, right. I almost feel like when I was a little girl that I was taught these things that,
Yeah.
they can't feel, they're so not smart, they have
Yeah,
no clue.
exactly. Exactly. And that's convenient for us, but
Hmm.
it's not the truth.
Hmm. Hmm. And you mentioned kind of knowing and loving their babies, which does break your heart because they're pulled away from them so quickly. Pigs, I've heard pigs are
Oh,
extremely intelligent.
they are.
Can
Pigs are
you
very
speak to that?
smart. They're just as smart as dogs at least. And that's been shown over and over again in all kinds of studies. They have personalities, um they have very strong emotions. Um, there's some evidence they can recognize themselves in a mirror. So
Yeah.
they are very, very intelligent, very aware uh, animals. We have evidence that they do things like if they're competing for food with other pigs, they manipulate them and do
Mm.
things that we thought only chimpanzees did,
Okay.
but pigs do a very similar thing. And so there's a lot going on in their minds, and
Mm.
they're plotting and scheming and thinking
Uh-huh.
and planning. And that's who they are. That is who
Mm.
they are. And so when they're not treated well, they suffer. They really
Mm-hmm.
do. And they know when their life is not going well.
Right. And I feel like they know also when it's coming to an end. And I feel like they know so much more than we give them credit for.
Well, I mean, it is really the case that all science on all kinds of animals, not just mammals, not just vertebrates, but even invertebrates,
Mhm.
um, keeps telling us more and more and more that we have been shortchanging the other animals, that we have been thinking about them in a certain way
Mhm.
as inferior or as not as intelligent or not as feeling, and that is wrong. And we have the scientific evidence to prove that.
Mhm.
So it's, every piece of evidence that comes in pushes us in that direction. So um, we can choose to ignore the science and decide that we're just going to treat them as inferior beings, or we can say to ourselves, oh, okay, this is a new way to look at animals, and they're right with us in the world. And we understand them, we get them, we
Mhm.
understand how a mother feels,
Mhm.
and that's a good thing. I mean, it
Yeah.
enriches our lives.
Right, right. And it helps us actually be able to relate to them on a deeper
Exactly.
level.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. You when you see a mother dolphin who is grieving her dead calf,
Hmm.
or an elephant,
Hmm.
I mean, that is grief. It's not a leap to say, well, a mother has a child that has passed away and she's feeling grief. That's what mammals do. My work with brains shows that we have the same brain structures that
Hmm.
other animals have that are involved in emotion.
Hmm.
So how could it be otherwise?
Right.
The way we feel emotions is pretty much the same way others do.
Yeah. And it's that with that scientific evidence, it just, to your point, you were saying like it just keeps building up more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And to me, and I know we're all wired differently, but I guess for me, even as a little girl, it just always felt like we're all sharing this space together, and they just communicate and think and behave in a different way than we as humans do, but it doesn't mean that they're any lesser. And that you can see how,
Right, exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, and the work that you're
And I don't,
doing is changing. Yep. Yes. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, far from lesser, I mean, we think we're on top of some mountain and everybody else is below us, but that's just a fairy tale. It's a mythology we tell ourselves. We told that for thousands of years, because it makes it convenient for us to do things to other animals that are not very nice.
Hmm.
But the fact of the matter is that, I mean, there are some animals who have brains, parts of their brain that are even more elaborated than ours. Um,
Hmm.
and so we're not the most of pretty much anything. We might be the most technically sophisticated, and we're very smart
Hmm.
as, an animal.
Hmm.
But I mean, everything that we think is unique to humans keeps falling away with the science, and that's just going to keep happening.
Hmm. It's amazing, and it's really cool to be at this time frame where I feel like all of this scientific evidence continues to build up, and it it starts to change the hearts of people, I think, and the minds. It's not only this world of we're thinking at and we're guessing at what's going on
Yeah,
with animals.
exactly. Exactly. It replaces, mythology and that kind of thing with fact, with
Hmm.
actual reality. And I think that's important because
Hmm.
reality is pretty darn interesting.
It is. It's yeah, it is. It's so cool. It's just so cool. If you One thing that we always ask on this show is something that I call one simple idea. And if there was anything that you could ask of our listeners of one simple thing that they could try today to help animals or help the environment, what would you say?
Well, I would say if you're thinking of doing things that might be difficult, if you're, for instance, thinking of going to pay a lot of money for your children to see a whale jumping around in a tank or an elephant in a zoo or these poor wild animals who are on display. Do something else. Just think about that. And if you decide not to go, you are really making a difference, because eventually, if enough people decide not to go, we'll phase that out. And your kids are not going to suffer for it. In fact, you're going to enrich their lives, because you're going to help them to understand why other animals need to live in nature like us. And I think, when it comes to eating, if for some reason you can replace a meal a week with something that's not meat, great, do it. I'm not one of these people that feels that, everybody needs to go vegan tomorrow. And if you don't, you're evil.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Right.
We need to all understand how, we can help each other live more compassionate lives. So, just small things like that. And when it comes to making decisions, and there is a decision to be made, maybe make the kinder decision or the less exploitive decision. And that helps. And then it makes it easier. If you don't eat meat on Tuesdays, then maybe you don't have to eat meat on Wednesday either, that kind of thing. And it helps. It helps, but be understanding of people as well.
Yeah, that understanding piece, I think, is a really nice add-on there at the end, right? Because there is something to come from being open and communicating, and it not needing to be all in immediately, but a gradual snowball.
And not to demonize people. I mean, there are some pretty horrible things going on in the world, but if someone's trying, or if someone, is just asking questions, then I think it's really important to just meet them where they are, and not be very us against them, kind of thing. So that's sort of the way I approach things.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And I try to do the same thing in my life. Like sometimes it might be boiling under the surface, but I know.
My family eats meat. I mean, my mother, my
Uh-huh.
sister,
Uh-huh.
my niece, a couple of my
Yep.
nieces
Uh-huh.
don't, but you're sitting down at the dinner table on
Right.
Thanksgiving, and there's a turkey there, and what do? You try to balance that, make people understand why you're not eating that turkey, and maybe have them over for non-turkey Thanksgiving so they can see there's another way, things like that. But no, you're not going to disown your family because they eat meat. And so you've got to navigate life. It's very complex, right?
It is. It
And
is. And
just educate people. That's all you can do. You can't force them.
Yes, yeah. And that sentence of you have to navigate life, it's really complex. I feel like just so well uh summarizes the incredible work you've done in the world, because everything you've done is so complex and pushing the edge of thinking. And hearing you talk, I think probably a lot of the reason that's been successful is because you are open and approachable, and can meet people where they are.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope so. And I hope that, just telling people who other animals are, helps for them to really come to their own conclusions about how they want to treat them, how they want to view other animals, view ourselves. And I'm hoping that's helpful. And I think, I'm also really grateful for having worked with a lot of great people, and also now working with a great team for the Whale Sanctuary Project. I mean, it's so hard and so complex, and we've got all kinds of people involved who know how to do this. And so that helps
Hmm.
quite a bit. Yeah.
Mm. And shows the possibilities of what people can do coming together.
Exactly, exactly. And so instead of just saying, dolphins and whales don't belong in tanks,
Mhm.
let's show that there's a different way to relate to them.
Mhm.
And that's what we're trying to do.
It's great. It's great. If anyone wants to follow in your footsteps, learn more about what you're doing, where would you send them?
Well, you can email me.
Okay.
You can also go to the Whale Sanctuary Project.
Mhm.
Um, you can go to the Kimmela website.
Mhm.
Um, you can reach me by message on LinkedIn or Facebook. So
Okay.
there's a lot of different ways to reach me, and feel free to email me and we can chat about whatever it is that you want to know about and talk about.
Amazing. I'll put all of those links in the show notes.
Great,
Thank
great.
you. Thank you so much for coming
Well,
on, sharing your heart and your knowledge with us, as well as just all of the work that you continually do for animals. It's just
thank you.
incredible.
Thank you so much, Brandy. This has been fun.
So, what did you think? Was I right? Isn't Lori like one of the coolest people on the planet? It's just so neat what she's done with her time here as a human. I'll let you in on a little secret. When I left Disney all those years ago, I specifically left to go into psychology, get my PhD in psychology, and hopefully apply that to better understanding the psychology of animals, literally the work that she is exactly doing. I just think that this type of work has incredible power to change the world, because it's hard to argue with science, isn't it? It's like when you've got science and you've got things to back it up, I think people just naturally um, do have a heart for animals. And then when it's proven to you, it's kind of like, oh, wow, my heart got even bigger today when I learned this. And I just think this work has just so much power. More and more people are advocating for animals, and there's just more and more data out there to back up their claims. So please spread the word about this interview. Share this with anyone who loves whales and dolphins, or is intrigued by studies of what animals are thinking and feeling, or just hears this woman studies brains and she knows what's going on in animals. And it's like that alone is really cool to go listen to, right? So please share and spread the word on all of this. There is so much research from Lori to read and watch. There are updates since Blackfish, and there's actually documentary updates since then that I think you'll find really interesting. She's done a lot of studies, or a lot of research on invertebrates, and such as octopus, and what's kind of going on with them that we maybe didn't think was there. Of course, the Someone Project, there's so much you can read there. The Whale Sanctuary Project, you can read about all of the research and work behind it. Links, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, links to everything are in the show notes. That's at foranimalsforearth.com/show/81. And then I also, just before we leave today, I wanted to tell you about a different topic, but something extremely important that's going on. It's an update on the 2024 Farm Bill. If you were around back when I did episode 75, Gabriel Wilgen from the Humane League came on the show, and he taught us about the EATS Act and some stuff that was going on in Congress. And that died down for a little bit. And as he warned, it is now back in full force. A lot of powerful people in the factory farming industry are basically working behind closed doors to unravel like all of the progress that's been made for animal welfare over the past many, many years. They're attempting to roll these things back and basically put like federal laws over states' abilities to make their own laws and their own decisions about how animals should be treated. It's quite dangerous, honestly, especially because it does kind of happen behind closed doors and gets slid in. So we need to reach out again to our Congress people. As always, the Humane League makes that super easy. Literally, it's like a 30-second pop in where you're from, and then they will draft up everything and send it off to your representatives and your senators, so that you can voice your opinion and just try to be top of mind as these discussions happen, to say no, like we cannot let this happen. Yeah, we have to do it again. So anyway, I'm putting that link in the show notes, and also it'll be in the description wherever you're listening or watching listening to or watching this, it'll be in the description right there. So you can click on it and send stuff off to your Congress people. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you, as always, for being here and for your hearts and just the fact that you want to help animals and you feel the same way I do about trying to do something for them and something for the earth to just make everything a little better. So let me know if you're listening, comment wherever you are, like or subscribe. Thanks so much. And I'll be back and see you in episode 82. Thanks. Bye.